enjoying it, maybe we go over a little bit, but I also like to ask.
I've got nowhere to be.
Oh,
So I can talk to you for 6 hours if you want.
oh, don't tease me because when I have a good guest, I always go, "Wow, I could do this for hours."
No, I like having a good yarn about all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
you have to try and shut me up.
I that's usually not a problem. All
Okay.
right,
But then I'm going to have some questions for you as well. Is that okay?
absolutely. I'm glad you said that because I like to do my podcast a little bit different in the sense, don't be afraid if you want to ask me something or just to make it a back and forth conversation instead of me just firing questions at you all the time. I'm
Okay.
perfectly fine with that. I may not have
As
the
you've done
answer,
that
but
too.
say again.
Aerobatics. Oh God. Oh God. What did you do? Lots of cool stuff.
I've done some things some people might say are cool, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, this is
I
it.
don't feel like my life resume is on the same level as yours.
I don't know. It does look that way.
All
But
right.
some say it's exciting, some say it's stupid, and I don't know which I really go for, to be honest. It depends which way I look at it at what time of day. I'm like, God,
Yes,
really
that's an
stupid.
it's kind of interesting, right? Because I have been told that, well, not maybe in those words that it's stupid, but certainly people look at it like that's kind of foolish. But I don't know. That's what life's all about. We're going to talk about that. That's
Yeah.
actually in my list of questions.
Okay.
So I like to keep the questions to myself
Okay.
unless the guest asks. So obviously we're at this point. You haven't got the question. So I just like so I get these good answers when you don't know what's coming. At least that's what I
I
think.
don't want to know.
And I like to go off on tangents. I have a set of questions, but who knows where it may lead. And I'm not afraid to go where the conversation's going. So I have that as a guide that's in there. I also like to tell my guests, all right, I'm just gonna kind of the way I'm gonna start it, just to kind of prep your mind for that. I don't remember how we met. I think it's through Jordan Wiley. We
Yes.
have mutual connections and so I'm just gonna go into that and then I'm gonna jump into I did some research and I've noticed that it seems like you don't like to be labeled or put in a box. And so I'm gonna ask you about that. Who is Janey? So that's how it's gonna start. Everything that comes after that, we're just gonna have fun with it. And then the last question, prep your mind if you haven't looked at the last question. My signature last question is what's your greatest failure and what did you learn from it? Not because I love to feel good about your failures. It's just this idea in my mind that I think a lot of people look at successful people and say they never fail. It's only me that fails. They don't fail. And I want people to know that everybody fails. And so that's why I like to bring it up. And I'll tell you, some of my guests avoid it. It's a hard thing to put your greatest failure out there for the world to hear. I get that. No judgment if you decide not to. And most of my guests that don't want to talk about it will just talk about failure in general. So you have that option. I've had some guests that start to break down in tears when they talk about their greatest failure. So it's anywhere in between. So that's the last one. Are you ready for that one? Just kind of curious. All right.
Ready.
Okay.
Always ready. Hands
Okay.
off.
Let's get it started. I often like to use, and I don't think this is actually a true saying. I think it's maybe a bastardization of a saying, but I like to say the one with the best stories wins. And in that is, I don't believe that life is about how much money you make and the material things you acquire. I think it's about adventure and experiences and stories. And so I think today's guest would agree with me on this. And I would say she's certainly winning in my mind as far as creating great stories. So, Janey, welcome to the Forge.
Hello, Ron. Thank you for my welcome.
This is going to be fun. Would you agree with that, Janey? Do you have a lot of good stories?
I think if I dig deep enough into the recess of my mind, yes, I can I can
All
pull
right.
out some.
We may have to dig into that recess.
Let's
Maybe I'll
do.
put you on the spot and we'll pull out some of those stories. As I was getting prepared for this, I don't know, it's kind of like we came together on LinkedIn and I really don't remember exactly how it happened, but I think it was maybe through a previous guest that I had, Jordan Wiley, another adventurer. And so is that in your memory? Is that how we kind of connected?
Yes, I think Jordan may have commented something to do with Paula Yates.
Mm,
And then
maybe Paul Reed.
Paula Reed, sorry, beg your
Yes,
pardon.
yes.
And then that comment came through on my feed, and then I found you, and I'm forever nosy. So I looked you up and I thought, who's this Ron? And then I saw what you did and I got in touch, and I like to talk about my stories, and I saw that you did a podcast, and I put myself forwards to you, which you accepted. And so here we are.
Of course I did. When I checked into your background, I go, wow, this is somebody I want to talk to on the podcast. I had this in my list of questions, and you just opened up this I don't know, this can of worms. Do you think I think maybe this is of course, kind of a question, but would you say you're a curious person in general? As you said, I'm kind of nosy. And that's maybe another way of saying you're very curious. Is that true? And what do you think drives that?
I'm incredibly nosy and curious. I do a lot of digging on a lot of things. I'm not sure what drives that. I think, I don't know, a thirst for knowledge, maybe a thirst for inspiration, motivation, because we get it from other people, seeds of inspiration from others kind of comes together to create maybe something that you can create that's inspirational or whatever it might be. I think it's just a thirst for it.
I'm glad you said that too, because sometimes I wonder, doing a podcast is, I've talked about it on here before. It's a lot of work, and sometimes I go, should I continue the podcast? Bottom line is this where I want to spend my time and energy? And I say I would miss out on conversations like this. I would not have met you, Janey. I would not have, we're going to have a nice conversation. I know we are. And I would miss out on that. So kind of going back to what you were saying, that I think I'm always on the lookout for people that inspire me, that people that, gosh, I look at your life and I go, what would it be like to live, a little bit of Janey's life? And so I pick up inspiration from that, and it gives me ideas. So maybe I'm a little bit similar, and I like to be a little bit nosy and curious as well. And I think the people that are seekers, right? That are looking for that knowledge, that wisdom, don't they have to be curious? I mean, that's a prerequisite, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And do you know what motivates me? I think is why the reasons people are doing things. And I mean, I've done mundane stuff, I've done cool stuff, but it always comes down to the why I'm doing it. And if I'm not in love with that reason or set on fire by that reason of why, there's absolutely zero way I can follow through with anything. So I'm very much led by my heart. And I was going to say to you, why do you do the podcast? Is it because you love it and the curiosity and and put aside the conventional reasons for maybe doing it, publicity or whatever, for and ultimately it comes down to what you just adore doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. When I started this, it's coming up, I guess it's been about 2.5 years that I've been doing this. And I used to do another podcast. So between the two, I've done about 100 podcasts, 100 interviews. And I remember, we'll come back to the why, because I'm really big. I think my friends get tired of me saying, what's your why? But I'm really big on that. But before I started this journey, and I recommend this to everybody, before you start any kind of journey, especially if it's a hard one, and we're going to talk about some of the hard journeys you've done, Janey. But I say get clear on what your why is before you start. Otherwise, you're going to quit right in the middle. And that's just a waste of time and energy. But so back to the podcast, I said to myself when I started this, like, okay, am I going to get rich doing this? I go, probably not. Is it going to contribute to my business? Yeah, probably a little bit. But I also kind of just boiled it down to what is it truly that is going to light me up about this? And it's what we were talking about. I get to meet amazing people. It's amazing. I mean, all the people that I've met on the podcast that I'm still in touch with, Paula, Jordan. I mean, I could go on and on. That is amazing to me. And I like to talk to people. I always consider myself I'm not very intelligent. I know that sounds bad, I feel like I'm average intelligence. I always like to be around people that are smarter than me, and I like to learn from them. So I
Yeah.
get to be in this podcast, and all my guests that I bring on, I go, oh, I get to learn from somebody here. This is like my classroom. Um,
Yeah, lovely.
so that's my why. And so let's kind of go back to this, Janie. Why, when you've done some things like crazy long distance walks, and you've also talked about, well, let me hold that one. So these long distance walks, why do you do these things? And are you like me that says you need to get really clear on what your why is before you start?
So there's two things. If I look at my why when I was doing them, they're very different to my reflections on my why.
Reflection after the fact?
Yes. So for
Okay.
example, I look back on some of the walks that I've done, and I was doing them because I was not in a good place and I was searching for something. And walking was my answer to that, or my therapy, to try and get clarity on where I was at the time and where I wanted to be. So the walks, the Southwest Coast Path walk, the first really long walk that I did,
And how
that
long was that?
that was 630 miles.
All right.
And that was around the Southwest Coast Path of the UK, so down on the Western Peninsula. And at the time, that the why was to honor the soldiers that had been wounded in Afghanistan. And that was my big why. Now, when I look back on that 8 years later, I see that I was in a lot of pain, because it was survivor's guilt, whatever you call it. Because I had broken my back, I didn't get to go to Afghanistan like I had planned. And friends were coming back who were injured, wounded, having these insane experiences. And I felt guilty for that. And that was papering over the crack for me, I think, looking back on it. And a similar thing with the walk in Oman as well. Because funnily enough, now I've done these things. Now I feel like I'm in a better headspace and more together and more kind of, focused on the next stage of my life. I'm going on. I forgot my train of thought.
That's all right.
No, it's gone.
All right. So,
Sorry.
and what maybe we'll talk about that, your accident, your horse riding accident,
Yeah.
where you broke your back. But, this idea of, in my notes, I have you on a previous podcast said, I don't know if I'm getting the quote exactly right, but you said something along the lines, I enjoy pain. And
Bingo.
let me talk about this, Janie, because I don't know. I just had a recent guest that, if you're not familiar with her, I would say you might want to talk to her too. Elizabeth Lati. She wrote a book called Gentle Power. And I really liked the book. And we had some interesting conversations. We're both, endurance athletes. And I went through a little bit of that too, where I think I was out there trying to go through therapy. And I absolutely believe that I was.
Yeah.
But Elizabeth and I talked about, do we, is it almost like a self-punishment thing? When we go out there and we seek this pain, is this a way of punishing ourselves? And when her and I talked about that, it was kind of blowing my mind of, God, have I just been beating up on myself for some reason? Like, I feel like I need to be punished. And so what do you think of that? Is that wild and crazy stuff? I mean, you say you like pain. What is it about that draws you?
I think initially, so the hardest thing that I ever did and the most pain I was ever in is when I had my first shower coming out of breaking my back and having the metal work put in. So sitting in that chair, I was like flopped, and it took every ounce of my mental and physical ability to remain upright for that shower. And I'm not a massive crier, but I was just in tears because I was just so exhausted and tired, and I slept for 4 hours afterwards. And so for some reason that stays in my memory, and I think, Jesus, man, that's the most I've ever given to anything. And I was trying to reach that and hit that bar. For what reason? I don't know. I just think, can I hurt myself enough to do that? And I think that is part of post-traumatic growth. So we all
Mm.
concentrate on post-traumatic stress, but there's the other sister, which I debate is good or bad, I'm not sure, but maybe it's the stage after the post-traumatic growth that is the growth, if you see what I mean. Because I don't want to hurt myself anymore. You know, like I enjoy going for my dog walks for an hour. Do I want to put a pack on my back again and walk with a house on my back? No, it hurts. Like, I'm done. And maybe it's a case of, you know, maybe I've proved myself now. I've proved myself maybe to others, but mainly to myself. I think that's the thing. But so physically, yes, I know I can do it. And that's a tick off the, you know, that's done now. I think life is a tick box exercise for me as well. I've done that. Now what? What is it that fuels me and makes me want to jump up and go, let's go?
Mm. Oh gosh, I feel like I have a similar story. I went into, Ironman triathlons and then long distance ultra running, 50 miles, and I even
Yeah.
tried to do 100 miles. And so what was I doing? Again, going back to, I think it was a little bit of therapy for me, and I had to battle some demons in my mind. And now I feel like I'm in a good place. I feel like the therapy worked. And I don't have that burning desire to go out and try to run 50 or 100 miles now. And I wonder, am I just getting soft? Part of this podcast is doing hard things, facing adversity, getting beyond obstacles and all the lessons I learned from it. And I think you did as well. What do we do next, Janey? What do you do now to kind of challenge yourself? If it's not strapping on a backpack and walking 600 miles, although you just did a documentary about something like this, but what is it now that gets you going, that challenges you to do hard stuff?
So I think a lot of it comes down to the relationship I had with my father, my late father. And, I often ask myself, what is success and what is my definition of success? And the lines get very blurred, I think, between a profoundly influential character in my life, my father, who had a family to provide for, who was very patriarchal as well. So all that sort of lay on him. His motivation was money to provide for us. And so somewhere along the lines, my definition of success is, and I'm still not sure, it's money. I think I've done stuff, I've done cool stuff. I've done the life-changing walk, which, is it life-changing? People, I kind of done things other way around. So normally you get the people they've burnt themselves out, they've worked really hard, they've got themselves securely, financially secure, and then they go for the life-changing walk, which I did with no money. And now I'm like, well, I've never made any significant money to consider myself a success in that sphere. So now it's about business, but it's about business on my terms and the things that I love. It's not just about picking something that is going to make money. I've now kind of reached the stage where actually this is something that I completely adore, and I'm going to now try and monetize it, which comes with even harder challenges than all of the other stuff, because there's so much mental issues around money for me.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And one of the things that I'm wrestling with is, I resonate with a lot of what you said. Is, can we be passionate? Do what we're passionate about. Can we have integrity? Can we be kind and still make money? Is that can we hold those together? And I absolutely believe we can. I recently had an interaction with somebody on LinkedIn. They said, when you're in business, people aren't nice. And I go, is that a problem? I think to myself, does business have to be cutthroat? I mean, that was exactly the word she used in her post. And I go, wow, I don't want to do business that way. I want to make money, but I also want to do it in the right way. So I think we're on the same page there. But I think I don't know. I always say success is not about money, right? But, and so I would ask you, Janey, why? I mean, you said that is, how do you frame, I don't know, making money with success? How do those connect?
I'm not sure just yet, to be honest. Like, I spoke to my accountant and he said to me, you don't think you're a success because you haven't got all the zeros. He said, but trust me, you are a success.
Ah, like it.
And that coming from my accountant was really like, wow, actually. But I still feel, you know, to be totally financially secure for yourself, and especially as a woman from a patriarchal family where you're kind of controlled by money in a way, that's one of the most important things to me now. It really is. And like, I hope, you know, I say to my brother with his young girls, say, please God, please teach them to be financially independent, you know, because I wasn't really. But on the other hand, I was taught to be completely fearless. So there's funny contradictions going on, and these are the kind of things that I'm working out at the moment with my business. And it's also the having the self-confidence and,
Yeah.
you know, to say, yes, I am worth it. And yes, what I deliver is worthy and valuable. And I think I landed on that literally in the last couple of days, where I feel fully confident in my offering now.
Yeah. You know, for me personally, I say, okay, and this happens a lot with a lot of people, is your self-worth tied to your bank account, right? We certainly in the United States, we look at people that have a lot of money. We look at them, we put them on a pedestal, and we say they must be successful because that's I don't know, the yardstick, the thing we measure people's success. And I say, there's a lot of people that have big bank accounts that are not successful in my mind, and they're not living a life that I would want to live. So I think we've got to separate that, and I think we can, right? We can say, yes, I can do this, and I know whether my bank account is really full or it's empty, I'm still the same person. I still have, you know, self-worth. I still love myself, and I think that's where money is not a harmful thing, right?
Yeah,
And I think you would agree, would you not?
yeah, I do. Money's a great thing. You know, I think having too little money is rubbish, obviously. Having too much money comes with its own set of issues and pros and cons, you know, because then you need to nurture that money and look after it and make sure it doesn't depreciate in value. And, you know, so it comes with it another whole set of issues. It's a really, I don't know, it's a really contentious thing, but I don't care for the big house, because then you have to maintain it and you have to continue this trudgery of work potentially that then has to keep paying for this sort of idealized thing of, actually, do I need it? Do I really? I mean, like, I pretty much live off air, you know what? Like, I don't really want for much, but I just sort of have this tick box thing of, yes, now I want to make money. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean,
So this brings up a good point. Let's say I'm going to give you 10 million US dollars right now. Jane, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to live your life differently if you had that kind of money?
oh
Would you do
God.
all the same things, or would you do something different? What would that kind of money do for you?
I think I would probably, I mean, I rent, so I would probably buy a house with a garden where I could have a shed with tools in.
Nice, nice.
And a studio. You know, I'd like my own sort of fun working space. But other than that, no, I don't, you know, clothes don't really interest me. I like walking, I like my wellies. I have about 3 pairs of shoes, and I just like, I like being with my dogs and my other half. And actually he is very similar as well. Like, we're both quite content with a pretty simple life. I mean, I might travel a bit. I don't know. I don't think it would change dramatically. I'd put more money into my business to grow it.
Invest back in the business. There you go. And
Yeah, that's
what would you be trying to do with that business? What is the point of the business that you have? And let's talk about that business. And what are you trying to accomplish with that business?
okay. So I think my motivation really is surrounds legacy and my
Mm,
legacy. Because never had children, don't want children. I then got a bit concerned that I was like, oh my God, what, I'm going through all of this and living this life and these struggles and, you know, seeing other people struggle and have a horrible time. And you just think, God, this is awful. But then I think to myself, well, it can't just end and that's it. And then all of this sort of, you know, human whatever we do with our lives is just done. And that sort of frightened me. So I was just like, okay, well, I want to leave some kind of mark on the world. And I think a lot of that comes down to art. You know, I started life modeling because I thought, yeah, I'll be a painting on a wall or a sculpture. And then that evolved to the documentary and planting some seeds via film. And now it's my sort of fine art photography, which I'm having made into silk pocket squares and scarves. So it's all about legacy, really, I think. Yeah.
I like that.
Sorry, Ron, it
go ahead.
can get confusing because I've got so many little motivations that I forget about, then they unearth as I'm talking and going through it. So I'm pinging off in all directions.
Sometimes that's fun. That's sometimes the way we want to kind of go. Yeah, legacy. That's a good one. I'm also childless, you know, and so I would say to dear listeners, you don't necessarily have to have children to feel like you're making an impact on the world. I see a lot of people with a lot of guilt around that. I don't have guilt around not having children, but I think it does drive a little bit more sense of urgency for what am I going to leave behind, right? What is that residue that I'm going to leave behind in this world? If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what will people say about working with Ron, or what kind of positive impact did I have? So I think that, I don't know, that's a driving force for me as well. And so
I've got a question for you.
You bet.
So because you didn't have children through choice, through circumstance, whatever it happens to be, that gives people purpose. And if you don't have that purpose, you then have to search it out. Do you think that's why you've done a lot of these sort of more exciting things?
I think I think there's two reasons to that. Number one, yes, I would say I think it does drive a sense of, okay, what am I doing with my life? Can I, again, back to all that stuff I already said, what impact am I leaving? But also I laugh because, you know, my married friends with children, they go, oh my God, look at all the things you've done. And I go, well, I don't have to run around taking care of kids. So it frees up a lot of my energy and time not having kids, so I can go pursue those adventures that, you know, people that are married with children don't really have that bandwidth to do. And so in that sense, it's kind of like two things going on, right? I'm chasing that purpose because I didn't have children, but also I have the time and energy to go do that. And I don't know. I always say I don't think there's a right or wrong path. It's wonderful if you have children. I think it's being a parent's got to be the hardest job in the world, and
Yes.
and raising a good adult it cannot be easy. But I love my life. I love what I call my life resume, and I think we're very similar in that way, Janey. I looking at what you've done, I can't imagine that you don't look back and say, I'm pretty proud of that.
Now and again, if I'm reworking my website or writing something down, then I'll think, crikey, yeah, I'm okay here. I've done some pretty good stuff. But just on a general day-to-day basis, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about what I haven't done. You know, I'm like, well, I haven't ticked the money box yet, and I haven't done that yet. And it's that constant kind of clawing, and maybe that comes down to sort of, you know, not feeling good enough in the eyes of my father, but at the same time I'm grateful for it because I'm always striving. Like, I don't know what it would be like to sit down and not really do anything unless I'm completely exhausted, because I'm always on the go. I'm always learning or trying to do something, and maybe there's problems in that as well, but it's just how it is. So I roll with it.
Yeah, I did a TED Talk, and one of the things I talk about in the TED Talk, can we hold striving, you know, this idea of pursuing hopefully something meaningful to us, and at the same time hold being content, and having gratitude for this right here in this moment. I have a lot of gratitude for what I have, but at the same time pursuing. And I say we can. And I think we can go either way too far, right? If we go too far into striving, we get into this world of it's never enough, right? And it's always this never ending cycle, never enough, never enough, never enough. And I think that can be dangerous. But I also think sitting on the couch and not doing anything is also equally dangerous. And so
Mhm.
somewhere in between, I think we need to find that, I don't know, that harmony. Do you get a sense of that in your life?
Yeah, but do you know what I think I've accepted now is that, and this is, I think, key to sort of contentment, including striving, is the fact that everything, there's duality, isn't there? There's one has to come with another. There is no level. And I've come to accept that if I'm having a bad couple of days, I relax into it and let it happen and
Mm,
just go, yeah, this is rubbish. And I might have a pity party for myself for a day, but then I know tomorrow I'm going to think, just get a grip of yourself. And, I'm going to get bored of myself and just then crack on and have this massive surge of motivation. So I fully embrace that roller coaster of how I operate, and I don't want to change it. Like, it's got me this far. So I feel all right with it.
yeah, I'm smiling because that is something that was life wisdom that I wish I would have learned so much sooner. I'm very hard on myself, and I get that from my upbringing from my father. He was very
Yes.
hard on me, and so in my mind, I'm always hard on myself. And so when I would have a bad day, what would I do? I would be hard on myself. I would go
Yeah.
down this guilt trip of you're lazy, you're this, you're unmotivated, all these bad things that I would say in my mind. And once I learned, kind of like you, Janie, I finally learned to accept it, that
Yeah.
I'm not a machine. I'm a human being. I'm gonna have bad days. When I accept it, it's like, wow, the next day is almost always a good day. But when I
Yeah.
fight it, that one day turns into 2 and 3 and 4 days, and I just feel crappy about myself. So maybe that's a good lesson coming from both Janie and I, is let yourself have a bad day. So many
Suck
of us
it up.
are hard on ourselves. What's that?
Suck it up.
That's yeah, and that's this is the thing. I
Yeah.
talk about mental toughness and sucking it up, but sometimes that's the answer. But sometimes it's to give yourself some grace and some self-love and just say, you know what, today's not my day. And that's okay. I'm still a good person. And
Yeah.
that has been transformational for me to kind of grasp that. And I still slip into old bad habits sometimes where I start to beat myself up. I'm like, all right, stop it, Ron.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm glad you said that because finally I've met somebody that goes, "Oh, I get that."
Yeah, for
Excellent.
sure. I actually, do you know, I had this funny thing, and I don't know whether this was to do with my accident or not, but have I have suffered with depression. And actually, initially, I didn't realize I had it. I just thought I was a bit down, but I was diagnosed with severe depression, and I just thought, oh dear, I thought I was having a bad day. I think I didn't want to accept it, because actually I have a good life. But I think I had two quite severe hits to the head, one in the racehorse and one in a car accident. And I meet up with a friend of mine who was had diagnosed with a brain injury falling out of a Chinook in Afghanistan, right? And the things he's saying, I'm like, crumbs, I struggle with this too. And I'm like, you know what? I think even though I wasn't diagnosed with a brain injury, there was one. There had to have been. You don't hit the deck at 30 miles an hour and not, there's something's gone on in there. And I think it's to do with my memory, and also a symptom or a result of that is depression. So I think there was a combination of things. And oh God, again, I've lost my train of thought. But another thing, I did end up going on antidepressants last year. Oh, that was it. So I tell my brother, I really enjoy the depressive stages because actually my writing gets very intense. And
Mm.
I use writing as a way to pull myself out and to make sense of things along with the walking. And but then as I'm writing, I'm like, I feel better now. And then I'm like, damn, now my writing's got boring. It's less poetic. Now I'm not depressed. So it was like, shucks, man.
That's funny. There's been a lot of, throughout history, very creative people that had, I think, depressive
Yeah.
episodes. So that's pretty interesting. And I always like to say that everything that can be looked at as bad, a lot of times can be looked at as good. So you've looked at depression and saying, maybe there's something good here that I can use. And I was going to ask you how you managed, those depressive episodes, because you're not alone. And so writing, I'm a really big fan. My students and clients get tired of me saying, start journaling. I'm a really big fan of journaling, writing with an actual pen and paper, not typing on a keyboard.
Yeah.
That has been shown to be so good for us, for our mental health. And so you writing, I think, probably helps you snap out of that depressive episode. And like you said, you kind of get upset about that.
Yeah, no,
but
right. Sure.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I used to lay on the sofa and write on my phone. In fact, that's where I do a lot of my work and my writing is on the phone. As soon as I get to something that looks like conventional work where I have to be typing on the laptop, it's gone. I just, like, conventional work does not work for me. I'm working when I'm walking, I'm working when I'm in the bath, I'll be on, writing in the bath or something. Funny enough though, I don't want to walk as much and I don't want to write as much now. And this is how I know that I'm in a much better place.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's, I don't even miss that motivation to go on a long walk. Like a friend of mine said to me, do you want to walk from Hadrian's Wall or something? And I was like, no, I don't. Sorry, mate. Like, actually, no, that doesn't interest me in the slightest.
All right. So you just did a documentary, and you're going to have to fill me in on the details, but Arrowhead, and it was walking across a desert, right? Tell us about your documentary. When is it out now? And when did you do that? And tell us more about what that documentary was all about.
I think the document, again, the reasons why are very different from when it began to what I think now. And I can try and rationalize it, but I don't think there's any point. I think all of us in that team had to be there. We just came together and that's where we needed to be. But if I rationalize it, there were sort of seeds that had been sown in the past. So I dated this guy in the SAS who showed me an arrowhead in the empty quarter. I'd never heard of the empty quarter before. So I was like, this sounds super duper romantic. I want to go. He took me to Oman. We didn't go to the empty quarter, but got under my skin. It's a magnetic place, and the desert, I felt very magnetized to it. I had a calling, to be there. That's how strong it was. And I also think that sorry if you've just got that beep. I also think I had to work out a lot of things with my dad, with the relationship with my dad. As I grew up and started to get my own ideas, we started to clash, because I was no longer so compliant with him. And in a way, I guess you could say I was kind of becoming more like him. He craved adventure as well. And was very chaotic and sort of up and go. He'd take us out of school to go on holiday if he fancied it. There was nothing conventional about it. So there was a need for adventure, exploring. I also, I know it's a bit of a weird one, but I also think that if there's anything like past lives, I think I was probably an Arab man. I don't know why. I just feel like there's some little thing in me that just says that, and I don't know what it is, but I think I also wanted to explore the Middle East. I was fed up of the press. I can't stand the press because I just think it breeds so much hate. So I wasn't convinced that it was the Middle East was paying. I say the Middle East. I can't say that every country in the Middle East is the same. I don't. That's like saying America is like Canada. You can't, can you? But Oman in particular, you know, I was just intrigued by it. The dish dashes, it's just such a different culture. And I wanted to go and explore that. Does that answer your question?
It does, although there's more there that I want to know. For the listeners that are going, okay, what does this all mean?
Oh, I
You
didn't.
walked across the desert. Was it 3 of you, 3 women?
Yes, sorry. So me, Beda, and Athir, so my 2 Omani teammates, we walked the equivalent of London to Switzerland through the Empty Quarter Desert in Oman. So the Empty Quarter spans 4 different countries: wow. Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. So we essentially kind of handrailed the Saudi border of Oman's part. And that was, the message was to deliver that we're better together, regardless of culture, gender, and identity. Basically, it was a thing that I was just purely about strengths and weaknesses. You know, as individuals, no matter what we are, who we are, or what sex we are, whether we like dogs or cats, we all have individual strengths and weaknesses. And we need to plug those gaps to make the puzzle complete. We need to put the puzzle together. And so that's essentially how I pulled the team together. But I caveat that with walking with 2 women, because there is a cultural difference there. And I wanted to see that cultural difference. And if I had walked with Omani men, I wouldn't have seen that. So that was intentional to walk with women. And it was intentional to have men as support, not to protect us. That was not the case, because I did actually already plan to have a female driver, Sophie, who couldn't come in the end. But she was a very qualified desert driver. I needed desert drivers who are available for a month to support us. And it happened that I ended up with 2 men. Not even ended up. I say that was like they were the second choice. It wasn't at all. It's just who could fill the spaces, who could fill the gaps that we needed. And so that's how I built the team.
What did you learn from that? What was the best, maybe the most powerful message or lesson that you learned from that?
Conflict isn't a dirty word. And people pleasing is just absolutely zero good to anybody. And wanting to be everybody's friend is no good. You know, wanting to be liked by everyone is a waste of time. I learned lots of hard lessons on that trip, you know, and to have belief in yourself and your decisions, regardless of how you're being prodded and poked and pulled in other directions.
Yeah, I teach leadership, and it sounds like leadership, right? And I also say I'm a recovering people pleaser. I'm gonna put my hand up and say I still wrestle with that a little bit. So being liked was always something that was important to me. And as I counsel young leaders, I say you need to let go of that. Let go of people pleasing. Let go of always needing to be liked. But I also ask them, where do you think that's coming from? I think the important first step is, where do you think that's coming from? It's pretty easy for me to kind of go back in my childhood and understand that was me trying to get love and attention from my dad. Also, I moved around a lot when I was young, and so I had to go to new schools. And every time I went to a new school, that was kind of a survival thing. I had to fit in quickly and make friends. And so I think a little bit of that is what shaped me being a people pleaser. But I run into a lot of people let's say I'm a people pleaser. And I agree with you. I don't know if there's anything good that comes out of that.
I don't know that there is. I mean, I think we can use it as a way of saying, well, helping people makes me feel better, but actually you become completely depleted by it. But then on the other hand, if you don't actually know what you want, then it's hard to put boundaries in place. Or if you haven't been taught, what you deserve or whatever, so it's about kind of relearning that. And the only way we can relearn that is to expose ourselves to other people and see and cherry pick, I think, the things that, I look at different relationships. My mum and dad, I mean, they loved each other, but Jesus, it was tempestuous, And, the way my dad would speak to my mum and sometimes vice versa, I'd be like, that was normal to me growing up, very normal. And then I started, I think, when I went to university and started leaving my parents behind a little bit, I started seeing other people's relationships and how their mum and dad spoke to each other and how they were, a team. And I was just like, God, that's way more relaxing. And I think, and I'd been, brought up in a similar, I'm like, very much part of my mum and my dad, but I'd seen my dad. And so I had, parrot fashion learned how he was. And I realized it wasn't right, or it wasn't right for me. And I think questioning how your family brings you up is very important, because it may not actually be the right fit for you as a person. But you got to strip all that down, and that takes time and effort. And it's horrible. It's brutal, because you look at your heroes, your mum and your dad, and you just think, wow, you're only human. And that's hard, because you don't want to criticize your parents. They've only done the best by you. So
Do you think that's I mean, that's necessary, right? Would you agree with that? I mean, you said it's hard, and I would absolutely agree with you. It's hard work and it's not fun. But
yeah.
would you say it's necessary?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did, but I think you have to be prepared that when you open that Pandora's box, you're not closing it again.
Yeah, that's a good point. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, right?
Yeah, and then you're like,
Uh,
oh man, and but I have to say, a lot of the things that came out in that film would not have come out unless I knew that he was dying. As in, I knew my dad was dying imminently, and there is no way in God's earth that I could have said some of the things I've said with him still alive. It would have
wow.
killed him.
Wow.
And I've got over the guilt of that. And that is very liberating and freeing, because it didn't mean that I didn't love him. God, I love him. I still love him. I still learn from him. But I think we had a thing where we tried to protect one another, and I tried to protect him from knowing the hurt that his little girl has gone through as a result, so it's very emotive, the documentary. Not just for my story arc, but for Beta and Athea's story arc as well. So it's a documentary that will touch everyone in some way.
And is it out now? Is it available?
No, we're just having conversations with a distributor. We're entered in a couple of film festivals, so we're waiting to hear the results of whether we've been shortlisted and accepted. So we're just like on the brink of it being available.
And if I remember right, were you the director of it? I think I looked at co-director. Okay.
Yeah, so producer, co-director, and featured. I don't know what you call that. I was in it.
Going back to what you said earlier, that Pandora's box, I don't know if I'm in love with the TV show Ted Lasso. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
No.
I feel like a lot of people haven't seen it. It's on Apple TV, and I just read that a lot of people in the UK don't have Apple TV, but anyway, Ted Lasso, he's a American football coach that comes from Kansas, and he goes to London to coach a actual, football soccer team, and he really doesn't know anything. But he's the premise of the show. He's just very kind. He's a guy that it's all about kindness and treating people well. And in the show, they have a sports psychologist that's working with the team. And she said, I love this quote. She goes, "The truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off." So I was kind of going back into your conversation earlier that it's hard work to kind of dig around into, I don't know, what I call the caves. And you never know what you're going to find in those caves. But I think it's necessary work. So we'll go back to that and just say, I think a lot of people avoid it. They spend their whole lifetime avoiding those uncomfortable, messy things. And I think for me, endurance sport drew that out. When I'm on a long run, and I would think you would probably say the same, those things come out. It's almost like they have to come out, and you have to wrestle with those. And again, it's like therapy for me. I've learned a lot.
Don't they? Sometimes you think, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
And you have those sort of little mini epiphanies where you're like, okay, that makes sense. I can move on from this one now. And actually, interestingly, after I got back, and now a couple of years on from having done the walk, I now have a lot more empathy and compassion with my dad as to the position that he was in and the stresses that he was under. And I get that now. And I'm like, now I know why you used to get so upset with me. Now I know why we've clashed over that. It makes so much sense now. And there was a bit of, I think, maybe forgiveness of him and of me at that point. And that was nice. I've sort of have a different love for him now. But he was brutal. He was so honest. And this is the thing. He was kind and he was brutally honest, and he could be brutally unkind. So when we say we always have to be kind, then I think to myself, but hang on, Dad wasn't always kind, and that challenged me hugely, and really made me think, because one thing that I always admired about him was, even if it might be hurtful, you always knew where you stood, essentially. He would always, he called a spade, and that was that, and there was no sugarcoating anything. And I have a lot of admiration for that. I can't, I'm not like that. I'm a bit more diplomatic. Maybe it's because I don't want to hurt people like I felt.
Yeah. There might be something there. So I don't want to do that. Let's we're getting short on time here, but there was one more thing before we start to wrap up, and I think I'll be able to tie this into your dad. Is it's always amazing to me as I'm doing research on you, and I'm looking at, I read one of your blog posts, and it was your favorite quotes. And as I'm looking through the quotes, I love good quotes, and I'm looking through the quotes, and I go, oh my gosh, one of your quotes is one that I'm in the middle of writing my own book, and I have a chapter on the hero's journey, and the idea is that we are the characters in our hero's journey, and I think that we all should look at it that way. And one of your quotes from Shakespeare, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players." And so you love that quote, and you tie this to your father, and I love this quote too. Tell me why that is so powerful to you.
He always used to say it, darling, all the world's a stage. Any kind of whether it be business or relationships, it's kind of like, it's a game. It is a game. And you've got to play it. To win it, you've got to play it. And he was very good at playing it. you know, and he lived by that quote as well. And that's something that's always kind of stuck with me. And I think I don't know if I am good at playing this game, or, you know, sometimes I'm happy to play the game, but then a lot of the time I want to rebel against this game and say, no, it's a stupid game. I don't want to play it, but I don't know. I swing in roundabouts with it.
Yeah, I think we're all we're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's
What was it for you?
what is it for me? I mean, there's so much to it. Number one, I've heard people say, you know, we're all playing a part, right? And not only that, but at different parts of our lives, we're playing different parts. What I
Yeah.
was doing 10 years ago or 20 years ago was a different part that I'm playing now. And so it's almost like we switch into different characters throughout our life. So that's really powerful to me. And I also believe that in some sense, you know, you use the word game, but in some sense, I think of life is it's performance art. And
Mm.
so that being on stage as a performer resonates with me as well. So I think, again, no, for me personally, it's that I'm going to play different parts throughout my life, and I'm going to be on stage and to be the main character in my story, right?
Yes.
I think we sometimes we lose track of where we've been, right? You know, we talked earlier about I look
Yeah.
at the things I've done and I go, oh, that's no big deal. But people from the outside go, oh my gosh, I can't believe the things you've done. And you probably get the same thing. That's part of my story, right? That's my journey. That's my hero's journey. And oh, by the way, as I move forward in life, I should be really, you know, purposefully looking at what do I want that journey to look like as I move forward, instead of just going through life, I don't know, passively. And so all of that is wrapped up in that quote for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. Do you know as well, the weird thing is at the end of the whole verse, it talks about how we revert from being born, and then we grow, and then we become a child again, you know, where we're dying and we're dribbling and we've lost our teeth. And that's like, that's dad died of cancer. And I was just like, do you know what? This whole quote is what you've been saying. And now you're leaving us, you know, at the end of the quote. So it's quite like, it's a good sentimental one. I think I'm going to have it tattooed on me somewhere private.
Very good. That's a good one. If you're going to put something in again,
Yeah.
what a great way to wrap it up, right? And so at the
Yeah.
end of our life, we have to get off the stage, right? And we have, but here's the thing: at this point, we're still on the stage, and what are you doing with that time and that energy? Are you leaving behind something worthwhile? And we, you know, it all circles back to that legacy thing, right? And so this is our time, right? You and I and everybody listening, this is our time. We are on stage, and I would challenge the listeners to say, what are you doing with your time on stage?
Yeah. Don't be a victim.
Like that one a lot.
Yeah,
All right.
that
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I think part of my problem with this moving forwards with the money thing is that I behave like a victim about it. And I think once I jumped over that hurdle and go, no, enough of that.
Tell me more. Why is that? Why do you think you're a victim when it comes to money? I'm not following.
As in I had a fear of it, essentially. I was like, you know, a fear of putting a number onto me, I guess, and just how it controls everything. Money controls everything, essentially. And perhaps I was rebelling against that, but I was also, I think, still in the narrative of being a puppet in a way, you know. So I was still playing out that narrative. And that's what I mean when I was a victim, is when I stopped playing that narrative, then now I can progress.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right? We don't want money to be our puppet master. I'll just build on what you're saying, and I think we can do that. You know, you say I might push back. You say money controls everything, and I would say I've learned that I can be happy and live on a lot less than I ever thought I could. So I don't know that money controls how much enjoyment I have in my life. I think more money would be a good thing, but I also know that I don't need money to have a good life. And so that's kind of I don't know, that's where I'm at with money. But I hear what you're saying is
Yeah.
there's so much power to it. And I also like to use a thought experiment. What if there was no money? And this is a man-made construct, right? What if you could live your life and nobody had money? What would that look like? Wouldn't that be kind of fun? There's so much pressure and so much underlying messages around money that a lot of times are not good. And so I
Yeah.
just wonder, what if we just removed it from the equation? What would that look like? Of course, that's never going to happen, but I like to, I don't know, let my mind wander to things like that.
Yeah, I think I romanticize everything. So I think in a romantic world, that would be wonderful. But actually, a friend of mine, he did this project, a 2-year project, where he traded his photography for bed and board and travel. So he traveled around the world essentially for work. I mean, he had to,
Sure.
do the work and all of that, but never exchanged money. And I thought, what an incredible 2 years he must have had, doing that. And I know that because I bartered with him. He stayed in my flat for 3 weeks and came and did some photos for me, so and I got a lot out of what he was doing.
Maybe that's as close as we're going to get to a
Yeah,
world without money. And I can't, we started this conversation talking about stories. I can only imagine he had a lot of great stories from that time.
for sure.
Oh my goodness, Janey. We were joking before we got started that we could, we both agreed that we could probably do this for 6 hours, and here we are. We're a good hour into this, and I'm a little sad that we need to start wrapping up. But um, before I get to some of the stuff about how people can find you and work with you, what do you have any grand adventures on the horizon? What's next for Janey? You go. You said you're all done with long walks, but what else is going on?
I never say never with the long walks though.
Okay, all right.
Like I never say never, but it's my photography and my silk business. So I'm at the very beginning stages of building a silk accessories brand. With my photography. My photography is very blurry and arty, and it lends itself very well to silk because of the movement and the flowing
Ooh,
in
I
it.
like that. I like that
And
connection.
it's also useful. I think I tried selling art prints and my heart wasn't in it, so I didn't push it very much. But now with the silk, like I love textiles, have done since I was a kid. So it's now all the pieces of the puzzle are together, and I'm really excited about pushing that out. So I have my first production run going now for a client in Switzerland, for one of his events. And so that's what I'm building on.
Outstanding. And so building a business is not easy. I'm in the same process, maybe a little bit further down the line than you are. But do you think that doing the hard physical things like the long walks, do you think the lessons you learned from that will make you better at starting up a business, which is another hard thing? Do you see lessons that you can apply to this new hard thing?
Yeah, just I think one foot in front of the other, it's just and you get a little bit closer to your end, or to where you want to go. And certainly, sometimes you're tired, sometimes it's hard, but you've just got to keep putting that foot in front of the other. And everyone can do it. Who can't? Well, the majority of people, unless you're in a wheelchair, of course, but everyone can walk a desert, everyone can do hard things. It's just if you've got the want and the motivation to do it. I think that's what it comes down to, is finding that thing that sets you on fire and makes you want to do something. And then you'll do whatever it is, however hard it is.
Yeah, I echo that. When I have those days where I'm not motivated and I don't want to do what I need to do, my mind goes back to the hard things I've done, and I say, okay, hey Ron, you've climbed some big mountains in races, and the mountain that never seems to end, and you just got to keep going. And I draw upon that. I think to it, okay, just like you said, I go, okay, Ron, just keep moving forward. It's not going to always be pretty, but if we can just keep moving, then eventually we'll get to the summit of the mountain, right? Every climb has got to end. And so those are the kind of things that go through my mind. So it's really, I
Yeah.
appreciate hearing that from you, that you also do things like that. And those hard things that you've done have trained you
Yeah.
for this new challenge.
It's no party, Ron. Like, it's absolutely no
No, it's
party.
not.
And it's a huge struggle to innovate, to kind of, show up every day. And I don't always actually, sometimes I think I'm done today. I'm not doing anything. But one thing I will always try and do one thing, no matter how small, just so that I can kind of live with myself. But just one, even if it's a Google research or something, like give yourself a pat on the back. Well done.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because this is exactly what I do. Even one of my bad days, when I have no motivation, and again, back to what I said, I try to give myself, that grace to say, okay, it's a bad day. But I also say, all right, Ron, do one thing,
Yeah,
just so we can say we did something. And again, it
Yeah,
goes back to
come
that
on.
idea of we've got to keep moving forward, right? Even if it's just a little tiny step today, that's something that's progress. So that's, oh my gosh, I feel like you're in my head. I think
It's really-
we think alike in a lot of ways. So I don't know, the people that are listening, I hope maybe if you don't think like Janey and I do, maybe you adopt that, right? And it's not always easy, but that's part of the fun of it. In my mind, that's part of the fun is, I don't know, life would be boring if it was always easy and fun, right? Getting past those obstacles gives you that fulfillment that when you get to the finish line, you go, wow,
yeah,
it wasn't always fun. It wasn't always pretty, but I got here.
yeah.
And there's a lot of beauty in that. And so just keep moving forward. I think that's the underlying message. All right. Janey. So I don't know. I guess I'm gonna have to just keep an eye on you to know when your documentary's coming out, and listeners, if how other is there other ways that people can work with you? Give us your plug.
Well, I do corporate gifts of silk if you want pretty posh gifts for your clients. Also, I have started filming elevator pitches for startups and businesses, which I love. That gets me really excited because it's so energetic and enthusiastic, and you're learning about new things, and yet you're helping someone get their message across as well in a very natural way. And photography, classic car photography. Love it.
And where are you based at? Are you in the UK?
I'm in the UK. I'm in Middle England in Oxfordshire, so pretty accessible to everywhere. And also,
Outstanding.
I'm always just curious. Again, if anyone just wanted to get in touch and say hi, and then I'm always open to that.
Janey told me that
Good
anybody that
chat.
wants to anybody that wants to have a 6-hour conversation, Janey says she's open to that.
Okay.
That's a joke. She's probably gonna go, no, no, no. I think that, more people in the world that are kind of on that same, I don't know, that same trajectory would be good. I have to hit my mute because I've got a little bit of a bug. I've got a little bit of a chest cold, and so I keep having to mute my mic so I can cough. So if you're watching on YouTube, that's what's going on. That's wonderful. And going back to the pitch, as I'm starting to shop publishers, and I even have friends saying, okay, what's your book about, Ron? And I'm like, oh my God, I struggle with my pitch of tell me in 30 seconds, what's this book about? And so I could probably use your coaching as far as that goes. And that's not an easy thing to do, whether it's a pitch for a business or a pitch for a book, or maybe just something, in an interview. So I think
It
there's
takes
some.
about 2 hours. There's no pens and paper, but because I'm nosy, I question people, and then we go through a process of elimination whereby we do actually nail it in a minute, but in a really lovely way. And I should
Yes,
myself.
love it. I mean, that's coaching, right? Asking the right questions and probing. I think you'd probably be really good at that. All right. Let's get to the I don't know, the signature last question on the Forging Metal podcast is, what is your greatest failure, Janey, and what did you learn from it?
I think my greatest failure was the fear of failing and maybe the fear of success. What have I learned from it? I don't know. It's not easy. Like, I think I worried too much about what people thought of me. And I think that was my biggest failing, because actually nobody cares really. You know, you get the trolls, but actually everyone's too busy on their own path, doing their own thing, to worry about what little me's doing. And I think that is probably, I think I'm creeping closer and closer to that. I'm still failing on it a little bit, but I'm getting closer every day, I'm sure.